Hello, my name is Jessica Bennett, and this is my presentation on ADHD. How many students in the U.S. have ADHD? Currently in the U.S., there's approximately 11% of children that have been diagnosed with ADHD. And according to the CDC, there are about 6.4 million children in the U.S. As of 2011. And these children ranged in ages between 4 and 17, and most of them were boys. The percentage of children that had ADHD continued to increase. They increased from 7.8 in 2003. And the average child diagnosed with ADHD was 7 years old, and children with more severe ADHD were diagnosed earlier on. One interesting fact that I did find was that there were different states varying in percentages of children with ADHD, and we'll get into that a little bit later. How has the number of students with ADHD increased over the recent years? My studies, I showed that rates had increased by an astounding 30% since the 1990s, and based on a national study, boys were approximately 3 times more likely to experience ADHD than girls. Now, boys from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds were more likely to engage in externalizing problematic behavior, and cases and diagnoses of ADHD had been increasing pretty dramatic in just the last few years. The American Psychiatric Association said that 5% of American children actually have ADHD, but the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, puts that number at more than double the APA's number. So the CDC is saying that 11% of American children between the ages of 4 and 17 have ADHD. So that's an increase of 42% in just the last 8 years. So what are the specific behaviors and characteristics of students with ADHD? There are 3 subgroups of ADHD types and students with ADHD. So first is the inattentive type. And in order to qualify as inattentive, a child must exhibit at least 6 of these types of behaviors. There's paying attention to details while making careless mistakes, following instructions, organizing tasks and activities, maybe remembering to do daily activities, just sustaining mental effort while in the classroom or at home, keeping track of necessary supplies, maybe like being forgetful of them, and just listening when someone speaks to them. The inattentive type typically moves at a little slower pace, but they're not usually disruptive. And girls are more apt to have inattentive rather than the hyperactive type. So mood disorders are also mood disorders are also more common, and academic achievement is really their biggest challenge. Now, without support, these students are really at a risk of long-term academic and social and emotional challenges. So, predominantly hyperactive, impulsive students will have more of these types of behaviors, like keeping hands and feet still, keeping themselves still, staying seated. They have to resist running and climbing in appropriate situations. So obviously in the classroom is not appropriate. Outside would be more appropriate. Participating quietly in leisure activities. Children tend to want to fidget a lot when they're kind of left to their own device. Resisting being constantly on the go. Talking excessively, maybe blurting out answers prematurely, and sometimes when they're blurting out things, they won't really be on topic. They'll be off task. And just waiting for their turn. These students will, they have a really high risk also, just the same as the inattentive type. The third is a combination of both inattentive and hyperactivity and impulsivity. And these are the most common. So The hyperactivity usually decreases with age, but impulsivity usually persists until adulthood and adolescence and in adulthood. Now, do all students with ADHD demonstrate the same characteristics or degree of behavior? For this question, I would say yes and no, because there are several different factors. First comes age. Younger children will exhibit different behaviors such as hyperactivity, and as they get older, like I said before, those tend to fade, and that's when the impulsivity will appear. And at the same time, students will show many of the same behaviors as shown in the previous slide, but generally issues like behavior at home and emotional struggles, challenges with interpersonal impairments, completing schoolwork, at leisure tasks, they don't change really from middle school to late adolescence, and they're always going to usually appear in children with ADHD. According to IDEA 2004, under what category do students with ADHD identify? Under IDEA, students with ADHD can be found under the subcategory Other Health Impaired. So these students have always been eligible for special education services, but I found, according to a website called Adhd, just because a student has ADHD doesn't automatically qualify them for an IEP, and that was something I personally thought that they did. So I was really surprised to find out that they don't. IDEA does offer help to students with ADHD if they're eligible. So decisions about the need for an IEP is supposed to be is based on an individualized basis. So children with more severe ADHD would be more likely to qualify for someone that I guess is less impaired. So decisions, like I said before, they're based on individual considerations, and they're giving specific needs are given to each individual child based on their needs. So I guess that's why the law is called Individuals with Disabilities Act, because it really emphasizes on the actual student themselves and not as a group or a whole. Discussing effective class-wide interventions for all students, and especially for those who display characteristics of ADHD. ADHD is one of the most common childhood behaviors disorders, and is associated with inattentiveness, hyperactivity, impulsivity, and there's actually a large variety of different disruptive behaviors that come with it. With IDEA and a 504 plan, a student really should be able to have certain accommodations put in place by the school system that will set them up to be successful students in the future, then and in the future. Since the students with ADHD are more at risk for school failure, I really feel that these certain interventions really need to be put in place and upheld in each classroom. I know as children get into middle school, it's harder because they have different teachers. Behavior management would definitely be one, just because I know it can be very hard for a teacher to accommodate a student with ADHD, especially severe ADHD. So I think that they would need to focus not just on the ADHD symptoms, but the management of the behavior problems. So they need to focus maybe on some of what they're doing and not just the symptoms of it. Next, I would say an alternative behavior is incomparable with the problem behavior, and that should be selected first. It's really important to keep both behaviors in mind. Not do we want to make it clear to students that their behavior is unacceptable, but we want to also make it clear that what behaviors are acceptable. And those behaviors should be really carefully defined so that each teacher will be able to accurately monitor them. I would say maybe a behavioral sheet would be a good idea. That way the student, maybe if he or she was given that in the beginning, the first hour, each teacher could monitor throughout the day different aspects of their daily tasks, like if they were able to sit still, accomplish things on their own, if they needed help, how much help, where their progress is at. So I would say that sheet would go throughout the day to each teacher, and would be a good thing for each student to have. It would monitor their progress throughout the school year, and it would also give maybe their care team a better idea of where they need help at. I hope you enjoyed my presentation on ADHD. Thank you.